Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. My name is Emily, and I want to share with you the whole story of what happened when we clashed with our local homeowner association. It all started when my husband was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a condition that gradually deteriorated his mobility to the point where he required a wheelchair to get around. We knew that we needed to make significant changes to our home to accommodate his needs, which we did by installing ramps, widening doorways, and adding a lift to the stairs. However, we ran into a problem when it came to storing his wheelchair. Our garage was cluttered, and there was no room inside the house, so we decided to store it in the garage with the door open to let the air circulate. Little did we know that this decision would lead to a months-long battle with our homeowner association. It all started when we received a notice from the homeowner association demanding that we remove the wheelchair from our garage. The notice cited a rule that stated that garages could only be used for parking vehicles and storage, not for personal items. We were surprised by this demand, and we tried to explain our situation to the homeowner association. We told them about my husband's condition and how we needed to store the wheelchair in the garage. However, the homeowner association was unyielding. They told us that the rule was clear and that we needed to comply. They started fining us every day for violating their rules, and the fines quickly piled up. We felt like we were being bullied, and we knew we had to fight back. We hired a lawyer, and we decided to sue the homeowner association for discrimination against disabled people. Our lawyer helped us file a complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which investigates claims of discrimination in housing. We also filed a lawsuit in state court, alleging that the Homeowner Association had violated the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. The legal battle was long and difficult. The Homeowner Association had a team of lawyers and experts who defended their position vigorously. They argued that the rule was necessary to maintain the aesthetic of the neighborhood and that it was not discriminatory. They also argued that we had not exhausted all the administrative remedies available to us before filing a lawsuit. However, our lawyer was able to show that the Homeowner Association's rule was discriminatory and that it violated the ADA. We presented evidence showing that the rule disproportionately affected disabled people like my husband, who needed to store medical equipment in their garages. We also showed that the Homeowner Association had not provided any reasonable accommodation for disabled people, despite our repeated requests. The judge agreed with our arguments and ruled in our favor. The judge ordered the Homeowner Association to pay us $300,000 in compensation and to drop all the charges against us. The judge also ordered the Homeowner Association to revise their rules to make them more disability-friendly and to provide reasonable accommodation for disabled people. However, the victory was bittersweet. We had to endure months of harassment, legal battles, and emotional stress. We also had to pay our lawyers' fees and court costs, which were significant. It was a difficult and expensive fight, but we knew that we had stood up for what was right. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Several years ago, my friend, whom we'll call Boris, and I would always help each other do the spring cleanup for our properties. This included taking out damaged trees, preparing garden plots, and taking care of our weed-infested yards. I was going to be first on the cleanup detail, so I prepared tools and implements the Friday before the big cleanup was to happen. I sharpened tools and chainsaw chains, the lawnmower blade, and got everything in order. Among those tasks was mixing 2 cycle oil. I finished up kind of late and generally put things away for the next day. The next morning, Boris showed up with coffee and biscuits around 8 a.m. As we were sitting on his tailgate enjoying breakfast, our neighbors rode by in their beat-to-hell Chevy Cavalier smoking like a freight train. We will call them Rocky and Bullwinkle. Boris and I made the usual jokes about the amount of smoke pouring from the exhaust. Damn, bet they go to the gas station and fill up with oil and check the gas. We soon finished breakfast and thought no more about it. As we began to get the tools laid out and hash out a plan of attack, I could not find my gas cans. No mixed gas, regular gas, or a gas can in general. That's when it dawned on us why the car Rocky and Bullwinkle were driving was smoking so bad. I'm pissed, to say the least. Well, all Boris and I could do was go shopping for gas cans, gas, and more 2-cycle oil. After we returned, we saw Rocky and Bullwinkle pass by several times, but all in all, we got a lot done. The next weekend, we dedicated to clean up at Boris's. A weekend or two went by, and we had a family dinner at my wife's grandparents', who are Rocky and Bullwinkle's grandparents as well. Toward the latter part of the evening, we were having a few drinks. Most people had left, and my wife's grandfather and I were shooting the breeze when I had to take a leak. As I was doing so, I saw a gas can with very distinct paint on it. I inquired from the old man about how it came into his possession, and he stated Rocky and Bullwinkle left it there. I simply explained it was mine, as was another, and loaded them in my truck. It ate at me every time that POS car with my post neighbors went by. So I hatched a plan from a rotten egg. I went and bought a few gallons of gas, a few gallons of diesel fuel, and some other various oils. I made a concoction of these different chemicals, and filled my new 6-gallon gas can I had to purchase. With some clean gas, I filled the lawnmower and cut some grass that evening, making sure Rocky and Bullwinkle saw me. Then I put everything away, but forgot and left that rotten egg gas can out. I got up and went to work the next morning and didn't even think to check on the can. But when I got home, I checked, and it was gone. My wife informed me that my plan must have worked as she watched Rocky and Bullwinkle go in and out with the car, not only smoking but spitting and sputtering as well. The last time they rode out, they didn't ride back in. They gave me about an hour of peace before they came over and wanted to know if I could look at the car and see what was wrong. If it could not be fixed on the side of the road, maybe tow it home. My response? I've had a long day and have a migraine. Maybe tomorrow. I saw the panic set in when I told them that. That's when they told me they had no insurance and it was on a main road. Tough luck, so the highway patrol did run across it and had it towed. It was going to cost them around $500 to get it out of impound, plus they had to have current registration and insurance. The car wasn't worth it. Well, they're those types of people that good luck just falls on, and the pastor for a local church gave them an old Ford Taurus. It took me a few cans of rotten egg gas, but I got the motor to lock up after about a month. This time it quit in their grandparents' yard. So they scrapped it, and as luck would have it, they got their income tax returns. They bought a nice-looking Ford F-150, but it began having problems too. It smoked really bad. They did take it to a mechanic that eventually found the problem. He got the truck running right again for about $1,500, and I have never had any more gas come up missing. The next one is a petty revenge story. As Christmas time approached, I still felt bitter towards my nephew. My mom had lived with me for a few years while she was getting back on her feet. She didn't have much money, but she always helped out her kids if they needed it, even if she really shouldn't have. One of my nephews, who was around 10 years old at the time, asked to borrow my Nintendo Switch so he could play Fortnite. I said yes because I never played it. After a while, he asked my mom, his grandma, for $10 for the Battle Pass. She said yes and stupidly put her credit card information in his account for it. At some point in the future, another $10 or so was charged to it. On accident, according to the nephew. Oh well, it wasn't a big deal, so she let it go. Maybe it's due to my lack of experience, but I find the whole account thing between Nintendo Switch, Epic Games, and Fortnite to be confusing. I tried over and over to delete her card info out of the accounts, but he would always manage to get it back somehow. I don't think he could have written her info down. My brother had to drive 45 minutes to bring me the Switch to delete the info. Over the next year or two, he charged something like $300 to the credit card outside of the times she gave him permission. Somehow it was always a mistake, and he would immediately text and apologize. Eventually, he asked us not to tell his parents. My mom wouldn't do anything about it other than tell him to stop. I tried to stay out of it because it was between them. However, I got fed up after a certain point. I texted my brother to bring me back my Switch, and I was keeping it. I told him about all of the charges. My brother has always used my mom for money, including stealing from her. So he acted concerned, but in reality, he couldn't or wouldn't pay her back. He brought the Switch back to me. My nephew kept asking to have it back and was apologizing, but the answer was no. That wasn't enough for me. My mom wasn't going to force them to pay back the money, but I couldn't keep myself out of it any longer. I decided that my nephew wouldn't be getting the $50 gifts he normally gets for Christmas and birthdays. He could pay back his debt over the next 6 years, and I'd make sure my mom got the money back since we have some linked bank accounts. It's been 2 years now without any gifts from me. He may not even notice, but I do, and I feel good about it. She still buys him gifts, of course, but she's being repaid one way or another. The next one is an entitled People Story. In the year 2020, during the COVID lockdown, I was working at Tim Hortons almost every day. I worked in a small town, so most of the employees were older and chose to stay home due to the risks. That meant us younger staff picked up most of the shifts. No biggie, bigger paycheck. However, I ended up getting a temporary promotion to management with little to no training. I learned by trial and error, and when masks became mandatory, there was a bit of pushback. However, people needed their caffeine to feel semi-alive. During COVID, we experienced people spitting at us, throwing their garbage or whatever they could grab, upset because only 3 people were allowed to be on shift to allow social distancing, and they had to wait 15 minutes to get their drinks. It got to the point that the local RCMP would sit and give people tickets for being rude. Now, every day at 1:30, Ken would make his appearance. He'd waltz in, not wearing a mask, and every time he would be sent back out to get it to put it on. He'd usually just drive off and not order. However, Ken and his companion Karen came up with the idea of waiting for the officers to go on their lunch break, and then come into the store. Ken came waltzing in, no mask, and at the time, it was myself and a young girl who was in high school on the floor as it wasn't a busy day, and our co-worker, when I took his temperature at the door, had a fever and wasn't able to work. She told him that he needed his mask before we'd take his order. He said that it was fine, and he'd only take a few seconds. She refused and offered drive-through as he didn't have to wear one if he did that. Cue the meltdown. He started screaming that we were discriminating against him, that he had rights. At this point, I stepped in and sent the girl to drive-through, and I responded with, "Yes, you have the right now to wear a mask. However, we have the right to work in a safe environment. And if Alberta Health happened to come in and see I'm serving you with no mask, I would lose my job. If you choose not to wear a mask, that is in your right. But I'm going to have to ask you to use the drive-through." Well, cue the even larger meltdown. He proceeded to tell me I might as well be in Germany forcing Jewish people into train cars and sending them to death camps. At this point, I had been at work since 5 a.m. and frankly, I was done. I immediately began to speak the few phrases of German I know. The guy's mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. Finally, he was able to spit out a Nazi CNN. I said the few phrases again before asking if he'd like to get his mask so I can take his order. He demanded to speak to my manager, so I did a 360 and spread my arms out and happily said, "Hi, I'm OP, I'm the new manager. How can I help you today? Oh, I'm so sorry. Unfortunately, I can't take your order or deal with your complaint until you are wearing a mask. If you don't have one, I'd be happy to provide you with one." The guy absolutely lost it. I watched a 40-some-year-old man stomp his foot. As he's trying to come up with an insult, his wife walks in, upset that it's taking too long. Lo and behold, no mask. She begins the same speech of me being an awful human being, but I hold my hand up and say, "I'm sorry, ma'am, your husband here already gave me that lecture. May you try something else?" She then goes on and on about how they can't breathe with masks on, it's a medical condition, etc. I smile and say, "Well, your breathing seems fine since both you and your husband can scream at us for several minutes without needing to breathe. And if you refuse to wear masks, then I have to ask you to leave." Well, how dare I suggest that? They need their iced caps and bagels, and they aren't leaving until I give them, and it better be free for the inconvenience and disrespect they had to endure. I shrugged and walked away and started making orders for people in the drive-thru. Just as the lovely RCMP officers are walking in the door, Karen begins to throw whatever she can get her hands on at us. Thankfully missing, but destroyed a few of our monitors with napkin dispensers. The officers immediately grab both and drag them outside. She's screaming that I assaulted her first and she was defending herself, and in the process of her flailing around, she hits one of the officers. Ken is calling us all Nazi-loving bastards and he's being treated like a Jew, and the officers might as well take them to the gas chamber. Now Ken owns a car shop, and in a small town, word travels like wildfire. Ken and Karen not only got a few charges and a ride in the back seat, but Ken had to close his garage as all his customers stopped going. They also got a ban from our location, and the owner made sure to tell any other business that sold coffee about them. They had to drive over an hour to get anything fast food related. All businesses refused to serve them. Friends and family cut ties. They ended up moving. I bumped into them a few months ago and I couldn't help but ask, wouldn't it have been easier to just wear the mask? The next one is an entitled parent story. Wow, I can't believe I forgot about this account for nearly a year, but I was watching Reddit videos online and randomly saw my original post. And I realized I had totally forgotten to make an update, so I've come back to give one. There will be police and some mild brawling towards the end. I don't know if that qualifies as a trigger warning, but I just figured I'd mention it. As some know, I previously posted about my parents refusing to give back my Nintendo Switch when one of my siblings stole it, and many commenters had a lot to say about the things my parents were doing. They suggested that I call the police or CPS if my parents ever dumped my youngest siblings off at my door without asking again. Well, I waited and waited, but there was no contact between us for around 3 months since the last time my mom called and I refused to watch my siblings without being paid. Then it finally hit. My parents called me all of a sudden wanting me to babysit, and they acted like the prior incident with the Switch never happened. I told them I was not going to babysit unless they paid me, and it had to be a day that I had off work. My schedule had also shifted, so I no longer had Saturdays off. I had actually asked my boss for that since Saturdays were the days they asked me to babysit the most. Plus, picking up an extra shift was better for me financially. My dad got furious as usual and said that I needed to man up and help out, so I pointed out that he needed to stop acting like he had control over me. And technically I was manning up for myself in my own life, like he always claimed he did at my age. Yet he always worked Saturdays and put a ton of his responsibilities on me, so he could duck off as far as I was concerned. He started yelling violently into the phone and my mom took it away from him. I said I could only babysit on Sundays because that's my only day off, and I would only do it if they paid me $30 and included pre-packed lunches, dinners, and snacks for my siblings, because I wasn't going to waste my money providing food for them. That's not my job. And if they took anything from me, like when my Switch was stolen last time, I would get the police involved to get it back. I saved the receipt when I bought it and documented the serial numbers so I'd have no problem proving to the police it's mine. My mom's bitch mode kicked in and she started swearing like a sailor that just broke a tooth at me. I let her have her rant while pretty much ignoring the phone until she realized I wasn't responding and started demanding I say something. So I said that she and Dad have my conditions. Sundays only, $30 and prepackaged food, or they could duck off. There was a moment of silence on the line, and then my mom went off on me again and said that my younger siblings, who are 14 and 15, had to step up to help because I wasn't helping anymore, and they needed a break. I laughed and said, "Oh, like how you guys gave me breaks, like never." My mom tried to say that was different, and it was because I was the oldest child. I said that it wasn't different. They parentified me, and I lost out on much of my childhood because of it. And now I'm living my own life without them. And they are hypocrites to act like I should step up again when I'm no longer living there. And they have 2 teenagers in the house that can do everything I used to do. My mom shifted into victim mode and started saying that my teenage siblings were rebelling and not listening to them. I said their bitching and moaning wasn't my problem. They needed to figure out alternative childcare. I'm too busy with having a life. My dad got back on the phone and started yelling at me some more. I just laughed at him and said he was just blowing hot air, and that he was talking, but not really saying anything. My mom took the phone back and pleaded with me one more time. I reiterated Sundays only with prepackaged food and $30, and I won't hesitate at all to call the police if any threats are made or any of my stuff gets stolen. I heard my parents start loudly yelling back and forth at each other over what to do, so I said they can just work it out and get back to me later. Then I hung up. It was right back to radio silence for a while. Then one Saturday morning a few weeks later, I was getting ready for work when there was a sudden loud and fast knock at my door. The kind where you know they're doing it with both hands. My mom's done that for years as her knocking trademark to let me know she was there. And she knows I know the sound of it very well. And the knocking was followed by what sounded like someone loudly running down the corridor. I listened through the door and could hear my 2 youngest siblings bickering with each other and tapping on the door themselves. My mother just left them outside the door and ran. But because of all the warnings I got in my last post, I had a simple plan for this. I just opened my window, climbed out, and simply walked away. My apartment is on the ground level all the way at the end of the building, and I can climb out the window I have there easily by just pulling the screen out. I called one of my neighbors that lives a few doors down. She's a sweet old lady that likes kids, and I gave her the rundown. She's known about my situation with my narcissist parents for a while now, and called the police for me to tell them that there were 2 kids left abandoned in the hall after the mother pounded on a door and took off. Suffice to say, the police came and picked up my siblings. My parents called me later and were furious. I pretended to be clueless and asked what they were so mad about. My mom fully admitted she left my 2 youngest siblings at my door for me to babysit and ran. I asked if she'd just left them there without anyone answering the door, because I was already out since I had to work Saturdays. My mom just got really quiet for a few seconds, then yelled, "How the hell was I supposed to know that?" I countered that this was all her fault, and she literally abandoned her kids at my door on the hopes that maybe I was home, on a day I'd already told her several times I worked. Like she was trying to force me to skip a shift by trying to give me no choice but to watch them. She started making excuses, but I told her what she did was inexcusable and immature. She ended up crying, and I just let that go on for a while before asking if she was done yet. She went back into idiot mode and yelled at me that the police were charging her with child abandonment. I said that wasn't really my fault since she left the kids in the hall, then said I would have called the police on her as well if I was home, and she refused to come back for the kids, because I told them before that I work Saturdays now, so I refused to be trapped into babysitting anymore. The rest of the call was some more pointless bickering on her end and didn't really go anywhere. My mom somehow ended up getting off with just a slap on the wrist and a fine because she somehow convinced the cops that she honestly thought I was home and would babysit, or so my next sibling said when he texted me. I don't know how much the fine was, but the fact she had to pay one should make her think twice about just leaving kids at my door and running off again. My dad wasn't charged as well because he was at work, and he also claimed to be unaware of her intent to leave my siblings at my door. I was told he was actually pissed at my mom for doing that. The pot and kettle situation, this was had me laughing so hard. But I guess I have to give credit to my old man if he'd have never done what my mom did. Either way, that left my mom with a police record. That's a first strike in the eyes of the law, I think. After that, things really boiled over on Thanksgiving. My parents invited me over, and I was fully expecting it to be some kind of trap, and it was. At dinner, my dad just sat at the table smoking a cigarette and acting like he was in charge. He had my mom sit me down and then said enough was enough and he was ending this farce. He told me that I needed to move my ass back home and pay rent to help their mortgage and bills, as well as help parent my siblings because they don't have any time to themselves anymore, and the fine my mom had to pay hit their finances hard. I just said no, plain and simple, and I kept that up no matter how much he tried to order me. He ended up getting so angry that he actually attacked me, and he's not a small man. I thankfully am not either, as I'd been hitting the gym for months and learned some amateur fighting. I had my steel-toed boots on as well, so I gave him a swift kick in the balls when he came at me, then punched him hard enough in the face that he was down on the floor in an instant. He landed with quite a thud and even threw up because of the pain while clutching his goodie bag. Then I told my parents that I had my phone recording in my pocket the whole time, and I could easily prove he attacked me first. My dad told me to get out of his house and never come back, and I obliged, but not before taking a turkey leg off the platter and riding home with it to eat. Since then, only my siblings have called or texted me. They said that I'd walked out like a boss, and there are now running jokes in the house now about Dad's poor balls. I spent Christmas with a friend's family, and I've got a standing invite to come back for other holidays. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.